Good morning and welcome to the Mike Graham Show. This is the last show before Christmas, of course, so we've got lots and lots to talk about. Tim Montgomerie is going to join us. He's the founder of Conservative Home, who's now no longer a Conservative. He's now a reformer, because during the course of this year, one of the things that he did was he shifted his allegiances from the Conservative Party to Reform, like so many Conservatives have done. Danny Kruger's done it, Jonathan Gullis has done it, so many other people have done it as well. We'll be talking to him about the year ahead for Reform and exactly whether Nigel Farage can survive all of the brickbats that keep getting thrown at him and all of the slings and arrows that people are hurling at him, going all the way back to his childhood when he was at school, for heaven's sake. Also, Andrew Fox is going to join us as well. He's from the Henry Jackson Society. He's going to tell us about what he thinks is likely to happen in the coming year as well on the battlefront. And when I say the battlefront, I mean the battlefront. We're going to talk about Venezuela with Donald Trump. We're going to talk about Russia and Ukraine, of course, and whether or not there can be a peace deal. And we'll be talking about the Middle East as well, and whether Benjamin Netanyahu can win another term to go and get rid of Hamas once and for all. So much to discuss, so much to be getting on with. Also, I'll be talking about herons because I've been visited by a heron and I think it's a really mystical, magical and wonderful thing. And I'll be telling you exactly why I think it's been sent to me by my mother. This is, of course, the Mike Graham Show. It is the real home of common sense. Let's get it on. And so, it's been quite a year, hasn't it, in politics? We've seen the rise of Reform. We've seen them winning loads and loads and loads of council seats. We've seen them winning yet another constituency in Runcorn with Sarah Poachin. And we've seen, of course, the demise and the further falling of the reputation of Keir Starmer, who's now, by some margin, the most unpopular Prime Minister that there has ever been. And we thought we'd better take a look back at what's been happening this year because we only need to talk to one man about the state of play in our nation. And it is, of course, the founder of Conservative Home, now a member of Reform, Mr. Tim Montgomerie. Tim, very good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you, Mike?
Yeah, very well indeed. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. I mean, it has been quite a tumultuous year. And I mean, I include your decision to move over to Reform as part of that as well, because, you know, there have been quite a few defections. You know, Danny Kruger, of course, very importantly, many other Tories who were quite high up in the party, who have now suddenly decided they like the look of Reform as well. And what do you make of this as a year in politics, 2025?
You know, genuinely, Mike, I don't expect either of us were particularly optimistic about this Labour government. I don't think we're natural Keir Starmer fans. No. But I am genuinely shocked at how bad they have been. Yeah. Genuinely shocked. And not a little bit worried. Because what are we, a year and a half into this government? Yeah. And the damage they've already done. You look at the number of wealthy people leaving Britain, taking with them the investment and the jobs that they create. And this is only a year and a half in. They've got 3.5 years left. What damage could they do? And, you know, the extraordinary thing is, I think they have got to the same depths of unpopularity after a year and a half that the Tories managed to achieve after 14 years. And the most worrying thing, I think, Mike, is that I think they're going to get to a position where they know that they can't win the next general election. And they'll start to take decisions throughout this parliament, which will just be about ensuring their electoral survival, which will mean appealing to their left-wing base, you know, the Ed Miliband faction of the party. And I think the sort of decisions they might take on climate change, on tax, on trans, you know, the sort of stuff, we all know the sort of stuff, could really be damaging for the country, really damaging for the country.
And that is a worrying thought because an awful lot of what they've done so far, many people have said it's off into the distance. You know, like Rachel Reeves came out, I think, in November and said we will be doing away with asylum hotels by 2029. And people are going, well, that's a very long way off. And that means you're going to be spending upwards of £2 to £3 billion a year continuing to house these asylum seekers, illegal migrants, whatever you want to call them, in hotels. And then nothing that they've done so far. I mean, I'm going to be doing later on this week a sort of roundup of the year, and an awful lot of their announcements are way into the future and won't really change anything for several years.
Yeah. And tell you what, I say this with a lot of hesitation, Mike, but you know, we had the outrage, the pogrom in Sydney at the weekend. Yeah. And God forbid what I am about to say comes true, but this is what I fear. I feel we'll wake up one day and this small boats crisis, which basically no one's been facing up to, we've been managing this situation. We'll wake up one day, and people who've crossed the channel in one of those small boats will have committed something like we've seen in Sydney or in other parts of the world. This
Yeah.
is something almost most British people are outraged by it, but it's almost like we've become used to it, almost resigned to it. I know that's a lot of people are still angry about it, but there should be a sense of urgency about this. There really should be a sense of urgency because these people literally are breaking into our country and we do not know who they are and what they might do. And I hope they get a grip before, frankly, it's too late, because I think we might be getting to that point quite soon if we're
Well,
not
that's the
careful.
trouble, isn't it? Because, I mean, only earlier this week we were seeing Labour ministers crowing over the fact that, nobody had arrived in a small boat for 28 days. And, we've obviously clamped down on, this illegal trafficking of people, and we're winning.
Yeah,
And it's obviously because of our amazing new policy that they've stopped coming. And then suddenly the weather changed and 700
yeah.
came in the same bloody day. And you're thinking, well, those 700 people, by the way, are now living amongst us somewhere. I don't know where
No,
they are. Nobody knows who they
no,
are. And as you say,
no.
who knows whether they won't be in some way galvanized, militarized, or, somehow kind of, collectively given a task to do, which would be, as you say, a terribly violent episode.
One question for you though, Mike. What do you make of Shabana Mahmood? Because neither of us are fans of Labour. I'm certainly not a fan of her, but I've been quietly impressed with her. I don't think she's got the policies. I don't think until you basically leave the ECHR and you really deport people on scale. You have to deport the people who come here, illegally. You have to do it fast. But that speech that she gave in the House of Commons when she announced what she was going to do, I think she seemed to get the idea that we had to get a grip. She was the first Labour minister I heard, and I thought, I think she understands it. And whether her party, the Labour Party, whether the government will support her, that's a wholly different
Yeah.
question. But she's been the one person, I think, perhaps Wes Streeting to some extent, but she's been the one person in this government you think she's got something about her.
Yeah, I mean, she talks a good game. There's no doubt about that. My worry about her is, though, that they all seem to now tell regular lies and expect us to swallow them. For example, they keep talking about kicking out more people than have ever been kicked out before. That may well be true, but the number that they give, which is, I think, 50,000, hasn't really changed. It hasn't moved around for about
No,
a year
that's true.
because they moved
Yeah, yeah.
they moved a lot of people out of the country in November of 2024. Many of those, however, voluntarily left, and so the number who were actually physically deported and kicked out was only about 2,500. So they still haven't really done anything in terms of reducing the numbers of people here. And what I always say to people is, if we've
And many of those numbers, Mike, were actually the product of what the Tory government had put in place.
yes,
They
exactly.
benefited from Tory
And so,
measures, yeah.
right, but so if you take the view that it's about 170,000 illegal migrants who have come here on small boats since 2018, 2019, something like that, and they're only housing 30,000 of them in hotels, well, where are the rest of them? That's always my
Yeah,
question. The rest of them
yeah, yeah.
are in communities up and down the country in HMOs, in houses of multiple occupancy. And so people can see that. People that I talk to on a daily basis tell me that their communities have completely been transformed by the influx of all of these foreigners, effectively, who have no
Yeah.
right to be here.
No, and one of I've just launched the Reformed Christian Fellowship about a week ago, and we had a lovely carol service in the city, and I've had a lot of people say, "How can you be a Christian and back Reform?" And
Yeah.
my answer to that is one of the things I was most proud of British post-war history was really how we did integrate people. People came here, they learned English. We've almost been a colorblind society for a very long time.
Yeah.
And that is changing. And it's changing because the scale of immigration we're experiencing, there just isn't the capacity to integrate people properly. And I want immigration control because I want an integrated, racially harmonious society. And
Yeah.
if there's too many people coming in who don't learn English, who don't accept, basic freedom, freedom of separation of state and religion, etc., that's when we get into trouble. And I think it's the prize of going to the place where we were, which we was colourblind, where we really were living at ease with each other. And it's endangering that I worry about with the scale of immigration we're having at the moment.
Yes, and that's exactly what they worry about in Australia. It's what they worry about in the United States. It's what they worry about in Western Europe. You know, every single country really in the Western world has got the same problem, and nobody
Yeah.
seems to absolutely have the solution. But you know, one of the things we talk about an awful lot, Tim, as well as in addition to immigration, is just the whole setup of this Labour government. You know, Keir Starmer, as I said, has now reached an all-time low, I think, in terms of popularity. He's something like -70 or something like that, as opposed to -54, which is what he was about 2 months ago.
We're gonna have to invent new numbers, new negative numbers,
Yeah,
just to capture
exactly.
what.
You have to sort of make the graph even bigger so you can go all the way down.
Yeah.
But, you know, he continues to be very frustrating, I find, in the way that he approaches everything. I mean, only today he put out a tweet in which he talks about, you know, safety for women and girls, which is one of their sort of bugbears. And he says this: I want my daughter to grow up in a Britain where she feels safe in school, online, and in relationships. Every young girl deserves that, and every young boy should be protected from harmful, misogynistic influences. My government is making that happen by backing teachers, calling out misogyny, and intervening early. We can stop harm before it starts and save a generation of young men from the influence of online misogynists. Now, you know, we saw all this sort of playing out, didn't we, with Adolescence, that show that came out on Netflix earlier this year. I mean, is misogyny really the thing that the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland should be talking about?
Well, look, there is some horrible violence against women in the society. A friend of mine is a reserve constable. I think a special constable is the name in London at the
Yeah.
moment. And, yeah, and the amount of domestic violence he's seen, particularly since the lockdown, is horrible. Look, it's a real problem. Um, is it the thing that I would have the government concentrating on just at the moment? I don't know. The estimates are, I'll give you one example I would say was the top priority that I'd like the Labour Party to be focusing on. Estimates say that the British Army may have about 1 day of ammunition. That if, for example, we were attacked by drones, I've heard from people who know what they're talking about, they could defend Buckingham Palace for a couple of days. They wouldn't be able to defend the Houses of Parliament. They could defend Buckingham Palace. But even then, for 2 days, they'd run out, of ammunition and
Right.
resources. For every season, first of all, it was going to be spring, then it was going to be the summer, then it was going to be autumn, then it was going to be winter. The Labour government were going to come forward with a defence industry plan so that we would start making munitions. Still hasn't appeared, Mike. So look, of course, violence against women is something we should worry about. Of course, we should worry about that. What about violence against the whole nation from a foreign power? And it's just a government that doesn't seem to have its priorities right at all, and incapable of just getting things done.
Well, isn't it the case as well that he's kind of ruling the country on behalf of his backbenchers? You know, almost everything that Rachel Reeves comes out with, almost everything that Keir Starmer comes out with,
Yeah,
seems to me to be designed to appease the backbenchers in the Labour Party before
yeah.
it actually is to do anything for the people of the country.
Well, can I frighten you with something? I know we're supposed to be in Christmas mode and we should be cheerful. But I'm not a big betting person. But earlier this year, I took out a bet for £5. So I'm not throwing too much money away.
Yeah.
But 50-1 that Ed Miliband would be the next prime minister.
Oy.
And sorry, Mike.
I mean, I'm
I,
sorry to say you're the second person this week who suggested that this is going to happen.
and you know why I think it is? It's back to the point I was making a minute ago. I think Labour aren't going to aim to win the next election. They're going to aim to survive. No, they don't want the fall. Ed Miliband's been there before. He can kind of do the job. He can certainly do it better than Keir Starmer. He's certainly got a message. The Labour grassroots love him because he is giving them the green agenda that they really want. That's bankrupting British industry, but don't worry about that for the minute. And I think if you look at all the other, possible candidates for Labour leadership, Wes Streeting, probably their best communicator, but he's got a majority of 500, can easily be washed away at the next general election. Angela Rayner, she's still, on the backbenches, the whole legacy of her not paying the taxes, etc., etc. I just think Ed Miliband might come through the middle, and I have to say, I did think 50-1 was was pretty good odds.
That's quite generous, isn't it? Yeah. But I mean, he was so
If
hopeless the
it comes
last time.
true, Mike, here's my promise to you. We'll go drinking together with my winnings to drown our sorrows, at
Yeah,
least for the first day as
we'll
Prime Minister.
we'll absolutely need to, if we can still afford to do it by that point. But this is the trouble. Everybody is waking up this morning, shall we say, feeling less affluent, feeling less rich, less optimistic. Everything's costing more money. More and more people that we all know are leaving the country, as you said earlier. And I don't see that getting any better in 2026. Do you?
I don't, to be honest. And the thing that does frighten me is the cupboard is empty. The treasury is empty. We spent a lot of money on the pandemic. We spent a lot of money on the sort of the energy subsidies after the, Russian invasion of Ukraine. Of course, there was the bank bailouts in 2008. There's been a lot of stuff happening in politics over the last couple of decades.
Yeah.
And each time the state has made really big interventions, bailed out the nation in different ways. And we are living well beyond our means as a country. And so if there is another economic shock of some kind, what was that? What was the message that was left in the by the outgoing Labour Chief Secretary when
Oh yeah,
when he came in?
we've spent all the money.
There's no money left.
Yeah.
And there really is no money left. And what I don't know, and this is my big question for looking to the future, are we going to have a sort of a slow burn crisis where we gradually decline like we did in the 1970s? Or will there be a moment of truth when we finally have to face up to the fact we are living beyond our means, and we're going to have to take some very difficult decisions on welfare spending, probably the triple lock, and a few other things?
Absolutely right. And what about your own journey this year? Because you've moved across from, being a very solid sort of founder of certainly of Conservative Home and of conservative values, if you like. You've moved away from that and you've joined Reform. How's that been going?
Well, someone said to me the other day who recently joined Reform, said, "Have you ever regretted your decision?" And I said, probably about once a day. And what I mean in that is that it is a tightrope.
Yeah.
It's a gamble what I've done and what lots of other people have done. Reform going from 4 or 5 MPs to having a parliamentary majority, no one has done anything like it, in history. But I think the Tories are over. I did a big debate with Kevin Hollinrake, the Tory chairman, on the Telegraph podcast yesterday.
Yeah.
And, the Tories still haven't really explained why they govern so badly. And, why would you buy a new car from someone who can't explain why the last car they sold you, broke down on the motorway in the fast lane and, all the wheels fell off? And so Reform are a gamble. But I think Nigel Farage is the only thing standing between this country and some kind of lib-lab pact after the next general election. And I think he's the most impressive person in politics, Mike, I have ever met. I hate what the left are doing to him at the moment. They're throwing everything at him, aren't they? We all said stupid things when we were school kids. That's part. What's it George W. Bush said? When I was young and irresponsible, I was young and irresponsible.
Right.
But they're trying to destroy Nigel Farage because they know he is the only person that can stop the left having another term in office and can absolutely ruining this country.
No, I think so. I think I couldn't agree with you more. Tim, brilliant to talk to you as ever. Thank you very much indeed. Hope to see you often on the Mike Graham Show in the new year. We'll be going live, as we said before, on January the 5th. 7 to 9 every single weekday morning. We'll be taking voice notes from people. We'll be taking calls eventually as well. And so the world is opening up to independent media, and we're going to be very much at the forefront of it. So we look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a great Christmas.
Oh, yeah. And, happy Christmas to you and your family, Mike. Take care.
Tim, thank you very much indeed. Tim Montgomerie there, founder of Conservative Home, now very much a member of Reform, very much looking forward to Reform making a clean sweep of the local elections coming up in May. We'll bring you more detail on that coming up later. So a funny thing happened to me this week, right? And it happened to me a couple of weeks ago as well. And those of you who follow me on social media, and if you ever want to follow me on social media, you can find my X account is at IROMG. You can find me on Facebook as well. As Mike Graham. You can find us as The Mike Graham Show on Instagram and also on TikTok as well. So we are literally everywhere, right? But this is quite a strange story, and I want you to bear with me because you might not know exactly how important it is. And I mean, I don't even know how important it is. But I walked out of the house the other morning and the heron was back. And for those of you who follow me, you'll know that 2 weeks ago, I was coming home from somewhere. I got off the bus, walked into the kind of, backyard area of where I live, which is by the River Thames. And there was this giant bird. And when I say giant bird, I mean this is a big, big thing, right? It's probably about if it was sitting here on the desk, it would be about this big, like from my stomach up to my head. It's about, I don't know, 2 feet tall, maybe. It's got a great big long beak because it goes looking for fish, and it's kind of grey in colour. You'll see a picture of it in a minute. And I thought, crikey. That looks a bit dangerous, actually, because it almost looks like a bird of prey. And it is a bird of prey, effectively, if you're a fish, because, if you see a heron and you're swimming around in a river or a lake or a pond, he's probably going to eat you. So I took a couple of pictures of it, put them out, and then because it was nighttime, it wasn't that clear. And people were kind of like, oh, yeah, apparently it's a good sign, a heron. Apparently in folklore, a heron sort of signifies transition. So don't worry, I'm not transitioning to anything other than being a man, but transition, creativity, it talks about, a new beginning possibly. Anyway, I came out the other morning, not really thinking much about it, but because it was daylight, obviously I then spotted it again. And there he was sitting in exactly the same spot. And I hadn't seen him for 2 weeks, sitting in exactly the same spot, just kind of, looking. And I spoke to the mother of my children, and she said, it's all very good news, right? Because here's what heron mythology says, right? It symbolizes patience, wisdom, transition, divinity. They sometimes act as messengers or guides in cultures from ancient Egypt to Japan. Native American traditions also talk about them having great judgment. The bird appears in folklore in almost every single historic country in the world. The specific character heron in the blood of Zeus is a modern creation. It's not found in Greek myths, but it has been found in all sorts of other different, kind of sub-histories, if you like. And the mother of my children said to me, you know what? I wonder if grandma, i.e. my mother, who died a couple of years ago, has sent him to you. And, I'm not particularly superstitious. I'm not particularly likely to turn to that kind of, I don't know, witchcrafty kind of folklore-y thing. But actually, the more I think about it, the more I kind of warm to it. Because at the end of the day, I am going through a bit of a transition. I mean, we are launching ourselves at the world as The Mike Graham Show. You can join our Substack, of course, at themikegrahamshow.com. And if you're watching us on YouTube, you can subscribe and like it as well, which is always a good thing. We've already broken through 2 million views in 2 weeks. We've already broken through 116,000 subscribers. We're hoping to get that up to 200,000 at some point before Christmas, if possible. And we're going live with the new breakfast show, of course, 7 o'clock in the morning on January the 5th, Monday. But so I'm going through all this stuff, right? And I've had a pretty challenging, it might be said, last few weeks when, I parted company with Talk TV, the people that I'd worked for more or less on and off for about 18 years. So this heron is really quite symbolic for me. And I'm finding myself being quite taken by the notion that my mother is kind of watching over me. And I know that many of you will have stories to tell about relatives and people that you've been attached to over the years, and we might even do a special show about it because an awful lot of people have feelings about people who have passed on, people who have passed away, that they still talk to them. I'm not going to start doing a Ouija board or anything like that, but I think these are important things that we should be looking at, and I feel very comforted by the heron. I look at him, and in fact, my sister and I were talking about it the other day, and she was like, yeah, that's a really cool idea that the heron was sent by my mother to watch over me or to give me a message of some kind. And actually, we decided, both of us, that he looks a bit like my father. He's got that kind of slightly cantankerous, slightly kind of unforgiving stare. And he's sort of sitting there slightly hunched like that, with a great big beak. And I find it really interesting. And I mean, I'm not, as I say, I'm not somebody who in any way gets carried away by, black magic or, things from the other side. But I just think there's something quite interesting going on here. As far as the heron is concerned. In Greek mythology, it's associated with Poseidon, right? Vigilance and indiscretion, a good omen. Japanese culture, it's linked to spirits, purity, other worlds. Native Americans say it represents wisdom and good judgment and patience, none of which I've got, obviously, so I need it from him. In Celtic mythology, it symbolizes transformation, adaptability. Aztec mythology, it means place of the herons. They call it Aztlan, symbol of creation from ancient Egypt. So, there's a lot going on there. And I make no apology for saying that I'm rather fascinated by the heron, and I'm going to keep reporting on him. And whenever he comes back, I'm going to tell you about it. But I think it's a good thing. I think the heron is here to help. And maybe we'll try and figure out how to incorporate a heron into the show. I don't know how, but there we are. Listen, Christmas is coming. There's no reason why you shouldn't get a bit spiritual. So have a think about it. And if you see a heron or anything else that you want to tell me about over the course of the next week or so, let me know. Merry Christmas. By the way, when I was talking earlier about how tall the heron was, my producer Pooch just pointed out that I missed a trick. Because what I should have said was, he's about this high somehow. Something about just a little bit smaller than Sadiq Khan. So 2025 has been quite a year for all sorts of reasons. We've talked about the political side of things. We've talked about the financial side of things and how Rachel Reeves has pretty much wrecked the economy without necessarily needing any help from anybody, including the Bank of England. But we're going to talk now about some of the other big events of the year, many of which have been involved in the conflicts around the world, and specifically the conflict, of course, in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine, but also the conversations that have been going on around whether or not somebody can find some kind of peaceful solution to what's happening between Russia and Ukraine. So we're going to speak now to Senior Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, Andrew Fox, who's a defence expert, who's going to talk us through exactly what has happened really in the last 12 months. Andrew, very good morning to you.
Hi, Mike. How are you doing? Great to join you.
Very, very well indeed. Good to see you. I guess we should kick off with what happened at the weekend at Bondi Beach. The latest atrocity that we've seen happening as a result of the global intifada, for want of a better phrase, I suppose. People have been talking to me all week about this and saying the most shocking thing about what happened in Bondi Beach on Sunday was that actually we're not really shocked by it anymore.
I know exactly that, and look, we all predict this, and we've been predicting it several times, and we've seen other incidents where this has happened. We saw the attempted firebombing in Colorado, where someone was killed. We've seen the two people shot down in the streets of Washington D.C. as the attackers shouted "Free Palestine." We've seen, of course, the Manchester synagogue attacks just earlier this year, where two people were killed. And a lot more, I think it's worth repeating, would have been killed had this guy achieved what he wanted to achieve. And now, of course, we've reached a kind of climax in Bondi with a really serious shooting attack where significant numbers of people have been both hurt and killed. All of them Jewish. All of these motivated by hatred against Jews and anti-Semitism.
Yeah, and people say to me in the Jewish community in this country, it's really only a matter of time until something like that happens here. And as you said, I mean, it kind of already has happened. But the trouble is, it's almost impossible to monitor all of the people who might be likely to do that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and there are tens of thousands of Islamists under watch from our security services. And we're very lucky in the UK. Our security services are very good. And numerous attacks will have been foiled that we don't even know about. But of course, it only takes the terrorists to get lucky once. It's the old IRA saying, the security services have to be lucky every time, they just have to be lucky once. And unfortunately, on this occasion, these lone wolves, which are, of course, the biggest and most serious threat, much harder to track, much harder to predict. They're the ones who've caused all this suffering in this particular instance.
Yeah. And in terms of like the control, I suppose, of these people, in Australia, we saw the Prime Minister talking about clamping down on gun laws, making it more difficult for people to hold guns and to own guns and to import guns and all of that. But a lot of people said to me at the time, well, that's all very well, but they'll just use a knife. It's not really about the weaponry. It's more about the ideology, and it's more about the belief system that these people have, which is basically that this intifada that they believe that they're fighting is a global one and is against any person who supports Israel, or is against any person who happens to be Jewish.
Yeah, it's attacking the method, not the cause. It's not dealing with the actual problem. It's just trying to make the problem harder to manifest. And of course, we saw knives used in Manchester because guns weren't available. So as you say, this is a persistent threat. It's not going to go anywhere unless you deal with the root cause of it, which is first of all extremist Islam and the way certain institutions like the Muslim Brotherhood have infiltrated into our societies and our Muslim communities, and of course cause as much, if not more, harm to good, honest Muslims than they do to anyone else. And then it's secondly, of course, it's about once we've dealt with that infiltration, it's about preventing atmospheres arising, such as we've seen over the last 2 years, where blood libels about genocide and war crimes have spread around the world and have created this environment where such violence can be predicted and in which it thrives.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at a story in the Times yesterday in which it says police chiefs are under pressure to follow two of Britain's biggest forces in cracking down on those who chant globalise the intifada. And there's a lot of people who've got real sort of problems with arresting other people for things that they're saying. But clearly, these Palestinian protests have been going on now for more than 2 years. It seems like every weekend in London or somewhere there's another pro-Palestinian protest of one kind or another. Is there an issue, do you think, with our society in the sense where people say, well, they should be able to say what they want, they shouldn't be arrested for it? And where would you stand on that?
I mean, it's a slightly false analogy to me because there's always been limits on free speech. You can't, for example, go into a cinema and shout fire when there's no fire. And if then people get trampled to death trying to flee, then of course you're culpable. And it's the same if you chant for a word that means killing Jews and then Jews get killed, then quite rightly there should be a limit on that. There's no question what intifada means. The first and second intifadas in Israel were incredibly violent and were absolutely directed at killing Jews, and a lot of Jews were killed. To then go and say we should globalise that is very clear in what they mean. It's take that fight to the global Jewish diaspora, which is exactly what's happening. And you can say that intifada means the struggle to be a better Muslim, but then again, Mein Kampf means struggle in German, and nobody thinks that Hitler was talking about his struggle to be a better Austrian. It's very clear what this means in context. And I think it's quite right that we crack down on that and hold people accountable, especially when words, as we've so shockingly seen in Bondi this weekend, especially when words have meaning and people are harmed as a result.
Yeah, and in terms of the actual conflict itself, obviously Benjamin Netanyahu is still very much determined to rid the region of Hamas, to get Hamas out of power in Gaza and anywhere else where they might be sort of lurking. But what do you think is going to be the likely outcome in 2026 in terms of the global peace plan, I suppose you might say? Donald Trump seems to have sort of lost interest in the Middle East altogether.
Yes, he's far more concerned about Venezuela right now, and that is unfortunately one of Mr. Trump's downsides, is that he does sort of butterfly between issues and take his eye off the ball. The ceasefire hasn't really ever existed in Gaza. The hostages are home, which is a fantastic achievement by Mr. Trump, and I congratulate him on that. I don't think anyone else could have achieved that, so that's a good thing. But Hamas have never stopped sniping at IDF positions on what's called the yellow line that divides Gaza between IDF and Hamas. That's never really stopped. The IDF have, of course, responded. Just this week, they've launched airstrikes that killed Hamas's number 2 in Gaza. So it's not really a ceasefire, if we're brutally honest. When it comes to the reconstruction of Gaza, that's going to be incredibly tricky. 2 million people live in Gaza, and most of them, the overwhelming majority, are still within the Hamas-run area, in which they have now reasserted total control. The reconstruction, I think the Americans are going to start trying to rebuild in the Rafah area, to see if they can then entice civilians from Gaza to come and live in that half of Gaza rather than Hamas's half of Gaza. We're seeing countries pulling out of the proposed international security force that's going to be on the ground there. So Azerbaijan just yesterday pulled out from their commitment to this. So it's very much in flux. It's looking like an incredible challenge to actually get this reconstruction over the line. And I think we're going to see a stalemate persisting for at least the next few months. I would say I've spoken to RDF officers just in the last week. I was in Israel last week. I've not yet spoken to one that doesn't think they're going to have to go back in at full scale and as they say, finish the job of destroying Hamas. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that emerges over 2026, but it's incredibly complex.
It is. And is Netanyahu's sort of tenure still valid, would you say? I mean, is there a chance that he might not be the Prime Minister of Israel, this time next year?
Well, of course, 2026 is an election year in Israel. Bibi is a very divisive figure in Israel, to say the least. 50% of people love him, 50% hate him. And really, a lot of people's in Israel's position on politics is actually defined by their attitude to Bibi. It's not really left or right. It's pro or anti-Bibi, such is the magnetism and the aura he exerts over Israeli politics.
Right.
It could go either way. There's going to be a re-election campaign. Israeli politics is always crazy, and that's definitely not something I'm going to put my reputation on the line on predicting.
No, quite. I mean, talking of crazy, you mentioned Venezuela there as well. I think a lot of people in Britain certainly kind of scratching their heads going, what's going on with Venezuela? What does it all mean? What is Trump trying to take it over? Is he trying to grab the oil? Is he trying to, sort of somehow get American oil companies back into Venezuela after they were kicked out? What's going on there?
So I think we have to go back to the national security strategy the Americans published, I think 2 weekends ago, where they talk about bringing back the Monroe Doctrine. And the Monroe Doctrine essentially said that South America should be America's backyard where they exert the most influence. Venezuela is a deeply corrupt state with a bit of a terrorism nexus, but also with significant presence from China. Venezuelan oil is sanctioned, but 80% of those sanction-busting exports of oil go to China. And I think it's probably that's driving this desire to overthrow the Maduro regime in Venezuela. And the rhetoric around stealing oil, I think, as you say, harks back to that 1976 decision of Venezuela to nationalize all the oil companies, which derailed about $5 billion worth of US oil company investments. I think that's the excuse. The real reason behind it is to try and drive a rival power out of, in China, a rival power out of one of their power bases in South America.
Right. And finally, to Ukraine, I guess, because obviously in the last few weeks we've seen yet more attempts by certainly Keir Starmer and Western leaders in Europe to try and bring some kind of peace talks to a conclusion. Volodymyr Zelensky, who seems to keep popping up everywhere, whether it's the Dutch Parliament or the Irish Parliament, he seems to be on sort of permanent world tour. What do you think is going to happen there in 2026?
Again, incredibly difficult to predict because the two positions of the negotiating parties in Ukraine and Russia are diametrically opposed. Russia wants to be given land that they haven't managed to seize by force, and Ukraine is refusing to give it. And there's a very good reason that Ukraine doesn't want to give up that Donbass. There's that line of fortified cities that are the Ukrainian depth positions, if you will. They are the last sort of buttress of defense that would stop Russia punching through their lines and moving into the rest of Ukraine. And if they give them to Russia, that not only gives Russia fortifications that they can then use to defend against a Ukrainian counterattack, but also it gives them that free pass in due course, probably once Mr. Trump is out of office, to restart their war in Ukraine and try and conquer the whole country. So I can understand the Ukrainian position. However, they are struggling to recruit to their army. They are taking casualties, although not on the scale anywhere near the Russians, who are now at the 1 million casualty mark in Ukraine. It's quite an astonishing sacrifice of Russian life that they've thrown their troops into the mouths of Ukrainian guns to be slaughtered. So it's an incredibly challenging position. My personal take is that I don't think Mr. Putin can be trusted to keep any ceasefire deal. Even since this war started, we've seen Russian arms caches in Lithuania. We've seen drone incursions into Poland. He's made his intentions incredibly clear. And the bottom line for me is that no peace deal should be seen to reward Russia or leave them in a position where they can continue their aggression by other means.
Indeed. Interesting. And finally, just this week, former Chelsea FC owner, Roman Abramovich, as some people like to call him, is being told he has to pay up 2.5 billion quid to fund some kind of humanitarian sort of operation in Ukraine. What chance has anybody got of getting that money off him?
Yeah. Well, he was only allowed to sell Chelsea on the condition that he personally wouldn't make his profits from that deal. And these are the profits that we're discussing at the moment. It's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. There's unfortunately no quick mechanism for us to jump in and just take the money from his bank account. And clearly, he with $2.5 billion at stake, he's going to be very keen to hang on to that. So I think the most likely outcome here is a fairly protracted court process where we end up getting this snarled up in the courts for months, if not years, to come.
Yeah, I think that's sadly probably likely to be the case. Great to see you, Andrew. Thank you very much indeed. We'll see you in the new year. Have a great Christmas. Let's hope we have a more peaceful 2026, perhaps, than we did 2025.
Thank you very much, and same to you.
Great stuff. Andrew Fox there from the Henry Jackson Society, talking about the various conflicts around the world. Not a very easy subject to discuss, and not something that we would expect to be solved anytime soon, but certainly something that we need to be very much aware of, because let's not forget, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, still keeps talking to us about how we're on a war footing and we're getting ready for an invasion. We're going to be fighting them on the beaches. Well, good luck with that, because they can't even fight off the bleeding migrants, for heaven's sake. This, of course, is the home of common sense. So that pretty much wraps us up for the year, because although we've got Plank of the Year to put out on Christmas Day, don't forget to watch that. It's going to go out at about 7 o'clock on Christmas Day evening. We've also got the Review of the Year, which we're going to be putting out between now and Christmas. We're looking back at all of the things that happened over the course of the last 12 months. We've got so much to look forward to, because we're going to be live from this very studio come January the 5th. That'll be Monday, January the 5th, 7 a.m. We've already got Emma Wolf signed up to do a paper review for us. We've already got lots and lots of news and views and all manner of really interesting guests to come between now and the end of January. So do please join us. If you haven't done it yet, please go to the website on YouTube and sign up, and please like it, like everything you see there, and also subscribe. And similarly, now that we've got adverts on the YouTube channel, if you want to have a free look at what we're doing, all you got to do is sign up for a subscription on our Substack, which is themikegrahamshow.com. And you can pay a subscription there, and you can watch the show without any adverts whatsoever. It's all fantastic stuff. I'm going to wish you all a very Merry Christmas, a very Happy New Year, and we'll see you in January. And remember, even though there's an awful lot of them out there, just don't be a plank.